Welcome to the My Raggedy Herbs podcast. This podcast is for truth seekers, homesteaders, homemakers, and medicine makers who are eager to roll up their sleeves and learn how to make their relationship with God, their family, and their home their first priority. Now here's Lori Coates.
My grandma was born in 1919 and was raised in a very rural setting. It's from her that I learned a lot of what I know about growing food, food preservation, herbs, and life. One day, when she was late in her 90s, we were discussing organic gardening. We often discuss gardening, but this turned out to be one of the best conversations that I ever had with her. She asked me what I wanted to talk about, and I told her that I wanted to hear her thoughts about the subject of organic gardening. She quickly replied, "About what?" As I began to answer her, my head was filled with a lot of specifics. I could tell that she might become confused, so in a very simplistic way, I attempted to explain that there is now a term used to describe gardening practices where people grow things without using toxic chemicals, herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, and this term is called organic gardening. As soon as I said that, she let out a big belly laugh and said, "Well, that's how everybody garden. So why are they calling it that now?" I went on to explain that the goal was to be sustainable. This was a concept of using practices that wouldn't cause any harm to the earth or its inhabitants, and not only was it to prevent harm, but it was to enhance the environment. I tried to give examples of how everyday practices could affect long-term conditions. I told her that by avoiding the depletion of natural resources for the purpose of maintaining an ecological balance was smart, and that food that was grown this way was healthier. She listened quietly and agreeably. I decided to drill down a bit deeper into her memory and ask if she could remember her parents ever using anything to enhance their gardens. She said, yes, they did. They used to plow manure into the soil, and if one of their pear trees ever showed signs of damage to the trunk, my dad would spit some chewing tobacco into a rag, wrap it around that part of the trunk that had been wounded. We were both laughing, and I asked, "Well, what happened?" She said sometimes the tree would live and sometimes it would die, and we would replace it. It instantly occurred to me that even with all of our information, technology, improved varieties, and helpful additives, the simplicity of gardening hasn't changed one bit. You can give it your very best effort, but due to weather, pests, disease, and 1,000 other varieties, your best odds are still about 50-50. We have the ability to plant and nurture, but only God can do the growing. When I'm in my green circles, conversations about different gardening methods are comfortable and the words are familiar. The concepts make sense and the dialogue is easy. But on that day, in my conversation with my grandma, a person who was almost 100 years old and had eaten many meals made from the food grown by her own hands, the words sounded foreign, and explaining the definitions of organic and sustainable seemed silly. I was describing something that was centuries old and very simple, and was making it sound very complex and complicated and even political. In these days, when simple things can seem complicated and difficult to understand or explain, let me remind you the words of Psalms 54:4. Behold, God is my helper. The Lord is the sustainer of my soul. Our relationship with God isn't any more complicated than that. It is He and He alone who in the beginning created everything from nothing and continues to enhance the environment of our lives. He gives us the things we need to live, to grow and flourish, and to not be depleted. He keeps us in balance and has given us His Word to help us in times when we might get hit with storms or suffer harm. He is the true definition of sustainability. In gardening, we have to do our part, but we can only do so much. All praise be to our loving Father for being our ultimate sustainer.
The gardening information presented in this podcast is based on USDA Plant Hardiness Zone 7 for Central Oklahoma. Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our own research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or entity. For more information, please visit myraggedyherbs.com.